I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Canon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion fits? Ba-da-ba.
Put on your Ritz.
Yes, we are talking about the comedy classic, Young Frankenstein.
You know, the funny thing is that I grew up a choir kid, and I had to sing that song for, legitimately more than one time throughout multiple choirs. Because that is just a staple when you're a choir kid. And every choir instructor out there knows the absolute horror of just choir kids always wanting to do the monster part in the middle of rehearsal. We would absolutely just be jazzing it up, and then you get to that part and everybody just goes, "Put on your Ritz," and then the choir director goes, "No, we're singing it serious."
It says a lot that the song is now in modern culture known more for that movie than the movie it was originally written for.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where Harlem sits? Puttin' on the Ritz.
Yeah. Or any of the gazillion D movies it's been featured in since then. Yeah. It is something to have just a bunch of kids. And in fact, I think I knew that joke via other choir kids before I even saw the movie. I didn't even know what joke we were referencing. I just knew it was a meme in choir that you did that to annoy your choir teacher.
Early memes, the pre-internet memes.
Yeah, pre-internet memes, yeah. Because I didn't even, and then I think I saw the movie later and I went, oh, that's what we've been doing to annoy the choir teacher all these years. So yeah.
Yeah. So why are we doing Young Frankenstein this week? While this is a Disney podcast, the Disney brand doesn't really do horror all that much. But they did purchase 20th Century Fox, and there's a lot of horror movies in that catalog. And since it's the spooky season, a little comedy horror never hurt anybody.
Yeah. And we aren't allowed to talk about the Universal monsters on this podcast.
No,
which is what I really want to do.
Universal is the rival. Universal and Disney don't get along. Otherwise, Disney World would have Marvel characters. Yeah,
look for my Universal Monsters podcast coming soon. This is really just we wanted to talk about a movie we liked, and you can't stop us because it's our podcast. Neener.
I mean, this couple of months ago when we talked about Princess Bride, this is definitely another one of those movies where every line is a one-liner. Our circle of friends can just have hours-long conversation just quoting this movie.
We literally have friends with a cat named Abby Normal.
Yes. Abby somebody.
Abby someone. It's not even Abby somebody. That's the thing that messed me up when I was watching the rewatch, and he says Abby someone. And I went, has it really been Abby someone all these years?
Mandela effect?
And it really has been Abby someone all these years. How's that for breaking your brain? It's not Abby somebody, it's Abby someone.
And this is one of the rare instances where we get to talk about Mel Brooks, one of the greatest comedic directors of all time.
Mel Brooks. I just want to revel in the genius that is Mel Brooks. And the genius that is Gene Wilder.
Join me for my Mel Brooks podcast coming eventually.
Yeah. That's the other podcast that you want to do, is just talk about Mel Brooks till the end of time.
I can too.
Yeah. I mean, who could?
Yeah. And again, as you said, Gene Wilder, a great comedic actor, and I mean, for us, mostly known as a comedic actor. But of course, like it's his comedic actors, and it's him as Willy Wonka.
Which is not only a comedic role, but that's a horror, that's a spooky season right there. Just that tunnel scene is maybe the height of childhood horror.
Yeah.
So, that right there is on the top of everybody's Halloween.
Which kind of makes me wonder, now that Netflix kind of has the right to Willy Wonka, are they even going to make it on that level of scary?
Well, I mean, Roald Dahl always had his, 1 foot in that sensibility.
Because I feel like that was the one thing that the Johnny Depp version the Tim Burton version, I should say, kind of took a few steps back on that one.
Which is odd, because you would think that Tim Burton would just go completely in the horror direction for that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can't undersell Gene Wilder in this, because this entire movie was his idea. This is not so much a Mel Brooks movie as it is a Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks movie. Mel Brooks tends to get all the credit, but the initial idea was Gene Wilder's. He brought this to Mel Brooks while they were working on Blazing Saddles. He said, I want to do a Frankenstein movie, and Mel Brooks was not into it. Mel Brooks didn't want to do it. He was like, no, there's too many Frankenstein movies. There's Son of Frankenstein and Brother of Frankenstein and Second Cousin of Frankenstein. We do not need a Frankenstein movie. And Gene Wilder was like, no, I want it to be like his grandson, but he does not want to be a Frankenstein. He's running away from it, but they keep pulling him back in, and, hijinks ensue. And Mel Brooks was like, okay, that does sound funny. So...
And that really works in this movie's favor, because one of the key elements of every adaptation of the original Frankenstein is Victor just running away from the responsibility of what he just did. Turning around here, Frederick embraces that responsibility and does everything in his power to make the monster a full human, as it were. A man, as it were.
Yeah.
And I love that,
I'm going to say, full disclosure here. I really, really, really love the Frankenstein story.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where one of my favorite academic papers I've ever written, and it almost became my thesis. I considered taking it and turning it into my thesis for a short minute. But I did write a rather elaborate paper during my master's for, if you've ever read the novel Frankenstein, which most people have not.
Mary Shelley's Modern Prometheus.
Yeah, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. You know that the story of the novel is not the story that people know.
The film took a lot of liberties with that story.
So if you're like, oh, it's a guy and he uses lightning to create a well, no, there's no lightning in the book. And he's got an assistant called Igor. No, not in the book. And, there's a bride in there that, well, not really in the book. There's talk of a bride, but that's not in the book, really. And, and there's a little girl by a river, not in the book. And there's, villagers at a windmill, not in the book. And there's, like all the iconic bits, not in the book. Okay.
From the Universal film, yeah.
Yeah, and those because of the Universal film series. Because even Igor, not in the first Universal film. If you're talking about Igor in the first Universal film, you haven't seen the Universal films either. If you're talking about Igor in Bride of Frankenstein, you hadn't seen that film either. He doesn't show up until Son of Frankenstein, and also his name's spelled with a Y. So I wrote a whole paper about why do we not know the story of Frankenstein, and where do we get all these concepts from? It turns out that most of these concepts don't even come from the film. The film was already drawing from things like plays, earlier films. One of the earliest films we have ever is an adaptation of Frankenstein.
The silent era.
Yeah, I mean, extremely silent era. I'm talking about, it's like 8 to 10 minutes long, I think. It is an extremely early film. Not even a feature-length film.
That's barely a short, honestly.
Yeah, but it was extremely early, Lumiere Brothers type film. And it's based on the tale of Frankenstein. And I've watched basically as much of this stuff as still exists today, and a lot of it is fascinating. And I actually did a lot of research to trace where these various elements come from, where the lightning as the method for creation of the monster. In the book, you don't know where the monster comes from. It's just Victor says, I studied a lot, and suddenly I figured out how to create life, and then there was a monster. Like, Mary Shelley just kind of glosses over that. She's like, and then Victor did some sciencey stuff, and boom, monster. Anyway, moving along, because that's not the part I'm interested in. The important thing is he created life, and then he abandoned it, and that's the thing I want to talk about.
Mary Shelley, the originator of science fiction.
Yeah, science fiction was created by a woman. Shut up, incels. But yeah, so I did a whole paper tracing like where all this stuff comes from. I went through like old plays, old films, all the way through Lovecraft and Reanimator, all the way down to like Rocky Horror Picture Show. All the way down to when I wrote it, there was a brand new Frankenstein film that had just come out in theaters that I went and saw. It came out like a week before my paper was due. And I went to the movie theater and took notes and put that in my paper. To trace all the way down to the most modern Frankenstein adaptation I could. I am very into Frankenstein lore. So I love this film particularly. This film is also in my Frankenstein paper. Gene Wilder loved these films so much that he based this entire movie off of it. So when they talk about the history of Victor Frankenstein, it is not from the novel. It is explicitly from the Universal films, up through Ghost of Frankenstein. So it is Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, and Ghost of Frankenstein specifically that he is drawing from. And they loved the film so much that they actually found the original
set
props.
pieces. Yeah.
The lab props from the original James Whale Frankenstein.
And
they
the
still
people who
worked.
the people who found these props are credited in the opening of this movie.
Yeah, they still worked. They plugged them in and they ran electricity through them, and they still sparked and sputtered the way they were supposed to. And they look brilliant on screen. Mel Brooks went through the trouble of framing his shots and doing his cinematography in the same way James Whale would have, which is the director of the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein.
And in a big, honestly, I'm very surprised that the studio will let him do it. This movie's in black and white.
Yeah, they had a huge fight over it. The studio did not want to let them do it, but they had a huge fight over it and eventually, forced them into it.
It feels like we had the same conversation last year with Frankenweenie.
Yeah. Going back to our Brendan Fraser episode, if you love all the Frankenstein stuff and you love Brendan Fraser, go watch a movie called Gods and Monsters. It is about the life and specifically the final years of James Whale, who directed the first two Frankenstein films. It has Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser doing a wonderful little bit of acting tennis. It's a really talky film, but it does have a little bit where they kind of do a bit of recreation of some of the Frankenstein sets and filming as well with Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser, and it's really cool. So if you're into that, also a good film. But let's get back to this one because it is awesome.
And we kind of have a bit of a story with this one because you and I, back in the day, saw the stage musical version of Young Frankenstein when you were still living here in Chicago.
Yeah, we got to see a couple of people from the original Broadway cast, even.
Including Roger Bart as Frederick, who Disney fans might know as the singing voice of Hercules.
Yeah. I think we mentioned that when we did our Hercules episode that we had gotten to see him, but it's really good as a stage play, especially the Puttin On The Ritz sequence. If you get to see it done right by a professional company, the way it's supposed to be done, they bring down like mirrors from The Fly, and there's a whole group of dancers dressed as the creature, and it's a really well done sequence.
And I remember after we saw the play when we were leaving, you were surprised in how well Roger Bart sounded like Gene Wilder.
It's a really, really good performance on that. So just really good carryover on that. Really good translation from from screen to stage. If you're ever able to see live theater again,
yeah.
Highly recommended if you can catch a professional company doing it. So let's talk about some of the cast, because this has just one of the most stellar casts. Of course, we've already talked about Gene Wilder, legend.
Yeah.
We've already said.
How do you talk about Gene Wilder?
Yeah, I mean, we've already said everybody in our generation knows him as Willy Wonka. Probably was how we knew him first in our childhoods. But of course, from the Mel Brooks era, you got him in the Producers and Blazing Saddles as well, and then I could sit here and list credits all day, but I'm not gonna. It's just legendary. We've got Peter Boyle as the monster, probably best remembered to modern audiences as the dad in Everybody Loves Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
I knew him as his character on X-Files. He got an Emmy for that one. He guested in one episode and really left a mark, for that one. And I knew him at that point, and I went like, hey, it's the guy who played the monster in Young Frankenstein. But he's really good in that episode of X-Files. Possibly the only time a guest actor won for X-Files, I think. Once again, legendary character actor Marty Feldman as Igor.
And like a lot of his comedic roles, they make sure to mention his eyes.
Well, yeah, he did have his bulging eyes were his kind of calling card. Stemmed from a thyroid condition and a few other things. He said that had he not ended up with such peculiar eyes, he would have never had a career. He said that he would have just been a background actor with one or two lines. No one would have ever known his name. And so he said that if he'd ever tried to correct them, have some kind of surgery or something, he said it would have killed his career. But since he stood out, and since he had such talent for comedy anyway, he was able to really make a name for himself, and you would always remember him. Because if nothing else, he was the guy with the bulging eyes, right? So he made it work for him. And he really was just a comedic genius. He wrote one of my favorite comedy sketches of all time. And I didn't know it until I was doing research for this. He is the co-author of the famous Four Yorkshiremen sketch. Did you know that?
I did not.
Well, when I say house, it was just a hole in the ground covered by a sheet of tarpaulin, but it was a house to us.
We were evicted from our hole in the ground. We had to go and live in a lake. You were lucky to have a lake. There were 150 of us living in a shoebox in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And of course, he would become a regular in some of Mel Brooks' other films, like Silent Movie and stuff like that.
Yeah, and just a really interesting guy. So we have another Mel Brooks regular, Cloris Leachman as Frau Blücher. Of course, if you watched TV at all during the 70s, you'll remember her for Mary Tyler Moore Show and all of that. Yeah, just really great. We talked about her when she showed up in Muppet Movie. Terry Garr gets to play Inga, the sexy lab assistant.
Yeah. This is Terry Garr at her hottest.
Yeah, Terry Garr at her absolute hottest. She got her break in a very interesting episode of Star Trek, the original Star Trek, which was meant to be a backdoor pilot that never took off. Assignment Earth, which was so bizarre, where it had that, what was his name, Gary Seven or something like that, that was like a guy who went back to the 60s and was a super spy or something. I don't know. It was a really bad episode, and you can see why it never took off, but it was supposed to be a pilot for some other Gene Roddenberry series. But she was in what is probably my favorite movie of all time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She was the long-suffering wife that eventually gets abandoned because going off with aliens is much more interesting. She gets to be the hot, sexy Transylvanian lab assistant in this one. We get Mel Brooks regular Kenneth Mars back again as the inspector who tries to chase down the monster with his strange wooden arm that never quite works right. If you've seen The Producers, you remember him as Franz Liebken, the guy who writes the play Springtime for Hitler.
He seems to always play these kind of characters in Mel Brooks' film, because Inspector Kemp does do the one-handed pose at one point in this movie.
Yeah. And he does a similar kind of accent as well. So, and another Mel Brooks regular in Madeline Kahn, who plays Frederick's fiance Elizabeth. We talked about her again in Muppet Movie. Mm-hmm. When she showed up for a part in that. She worked with Mel Brooks a lot in What's Up, Doc, and High Anxiety and History of the World Part 1, Blazing Saddles, you know. Mm-hmm. One of her best roles ever, probably Clue.
Yep.
So great in that.
And he used to talk about Clue. Flames at the side of my face.
Yeah.
I hated her so much. Flames on the side of my face, heaving breath.
Probably one of the best line deliveries ever is that flames line. So yeah, and then you've got just, you know, some people in the background, like Gene Hackman popping in to play the blind man. And even some of the tiny little bit characters that you don't really recognize are kind of interesting, like the medical student that harasses Frederick at the beginning of the film is a man named Danny Goldman, who you will better remember if you're an 80s kid as Brainy Smurf from the Smurfs. So, yeah, there's a lot of kind of interesting people scattered throughout. And, of course, while you don't really see Mel Brooks much on screen here, although he is in the background, I think, in one shot as a villager, you do hear him a couple of times. He is the werewolf. Their wolf.
Their castle.
He is the cat that gets hit by the dart when Frederick throws it through the window. And he is the voice of Victor Frankenstein when they pan through the lab and you hear the ghostly voices of the creation of the original monster. He is Victor's voice being played back. So yeah.
And this was on purpose. Like, Gene Wilder did not want Mel Brooks to be seen in the film.
Yeah, he said that Mel Brooks, when he is on camera, tends to break the fourth wall a lot and pull the audience out of the movie, and he did not want that to happen. He wanted this to be a more self-contained movie.
I mean, History of the World, he does the It's Good to Be the King to the camera. Even in, I'm trying to think of the other, even in Blazing Saddles, he would often just look to the camera directly and directly address the audience during the film. So I guess he didn't want something that either intentionally or accidentally that would happen.
Yeah, so Gene Wilder basically put an ultimatum forward of, I'll do this movie with you, but I don't want you in a big part on screen. I want you to not be in it, basically. So they pulled Mel Brooks's cameos back to just kind of audio stuff.
Yeah.
So,
like, if you didn't see Mel Brooks's name in the movie, you wouldn't even know he was in it.
Yeah, honestly, because like I said, I think he's in the crowd, but he is really hard to spot among all the villagers. There is one person who's basically in the movie just because his name is Frankenstein. There's a guy named Clement von Frankenstein who is listed as villager screaming at the monster. And basically he's kind of just in the movie because his name is Clement von Frankenstein. He was in a lot of films. He has a really extensive credit list and a very interesting life. His family was basically some minor nobility from Austria and a diplomat who got caught in England when the Nazis invaded Austria and ended up receiving British nationality and a knighthood in recognition of the fact that they were nobility back in Austria, and escaped the Nazis that way. And then his parents died in a plane crash when he was really young, and so he was kind of brought up by some friends of his parents, and then he ended up moving to California and became a playboy with all of the British expats that were famous and hanging out over there, and then he decided to become an actor. I mean, he just had a really interesting career, but I'm pretty sure he's in the movie Young Frankenstein just because somebody told, like, either Mel Brooks or Gene Wilder or something, like, hey, I actually know a guy whose name is Frankenstein.
That'd be, there are worse reasons to get casted in a movie.
Because honestly, this was only the second film he was ever in his life. He went on to have a lot of other more interesting and notable roles with actual speaking parts. But he had only been an extra in one movie before he got cast in this. So I am entirely sure that he ended up in this movie just because somebody told one of those two, like, I know a guy whose name is Frankenstein. You should put him in your Frankenstein movie. And the last person that's kind of note is there's a guy who gets rolled out on a stretcher in the classroom scene at the beginning, and Frederick kind of pokes and prods and punches him in the nuts. Mr. Hilltop. That guy's name is Liam Dunn, and he has kind of a sad and strange Disney connection. His final film that he worked on was The Shaggy DA in 1976. And as they were filming a scene in a roller rink, he collapsed. And they had to take him to the hospital, and he passed away. And he had to be replaced in the film with John Fiedler. And so he is uncredited in his final movie, which happened to be a Disney film, because he collapsed on set and then passed away right after that. That it was just an odd Disney connection, but he was a character actor who was in tons of different films, including quite a few Mel Brooks films and many Disney films. Kind of a sad note to end the actor role on, but it was a kind of a strange thing to run across in the research.
So let's get into the film. Let's start with Frederick himself.
Don't you mean Froderick?
Froderick. So Freddy here, his family lineage is a tender subject for him. As we've mentioned, there's this one student that goads him the entire time of, what about your grandfather did this, your grandfather did that, and then it slowly over the scene enrages him to the point where he stabs his own leg with a scalpel out of frustration.
That had to hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, bravo to him for no selling that, but dude, that had to hurt.
So yeah, Frederick, he's a brain surgeon, and he's teaching this class on the brain. Hence, we had Mr. Hilltop. He block a part of his brain, and there's no pain sensations and stuff like that.
Well, apparently there's pain sensations because he does show a pain reaction. You see him go, oh, but he doesn't move.
He got kneed in the nuts. It's gonna hurt, but there's no reaction because the lesson is voluntary and involuntary reflexes. But I think everyone on some level can empathize with Frederick here, because I think everyone has at least one family member that they're ashamed of. I think everyone has at least one, and for him, it's his grandfather. How his grandfather went, kooky, wanted to reanimate a dead person. And that's kind of become his family's legacy. And he's doing everything in his power to divorce himself from that. Again, even changing the pronunciation of his name, just so he's no longer associated with that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that apparently Victor's shenanigans have spread far and wide to some extent.
I'm pretty sure there's a young girl who wrote a book about it in this universe.
Well, the interesting thing is that in this, it does seem a little iffy as to who knows what, because this one medical student seems pretty sure that Victor did something. Frederick says that there's no proof he did anything. The Transylvanian townspeople have lived through it, so they're pretty sure that, they've seen the monsters.
More than once, apparently.
More than once.
According to what some of these villagers are saying. I believe they say 5 times.
Yeah. It's based on 4 movies, but they say 5 times, so the people that he shows the creature to in the Puttin On The Ritz scene seem unconvinced that what he's going to show them will actually be true. So they're not convinced by the story of Victor Frankenstein. So it does seem that various people have their own beliefs about the truthfulness of the story, which I think is cool.
It's even implied, there's that one lawyer that gives Frederick the will and testament of Victor, that it goes back to his great-grandfather. So even before Victor, there was a Frankenstein doing something in that castle.
Yeah.
Okay, since it's just essentially a sequel to a movie made by another studio, there was The Son of Frankenstein, which was Victor's son. So I assume that would be Frederick's father.
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. So, if Victor is his grandfather, so, he is the son of Frankenstein. Yeah. Victor's father was a character in the films, So his great grandfather, you know. But I mean, it's all there. I mean, you know, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks did their homework. I'm not saying, but I do like that at the time that the film is set, people are going to have their own beliefs. You know, that's just a rumor. He was a quack. There's nothing to prove it.
40 years of rumors.
Yeah.
Things get around, you know. If we're going with the original happening in the 30s, and this is happening in the 70s. If we're happy, oh no, does this take place in the 70s or does it take place in the 1930s?
I think it's supposed to take place earlier than it was, because I don't think the original Frankenstein was meant to be set in the 30s.
Well, either way, generally speaking, let's say it's been 40 years since the original 30s film. So 40 years of rumors and hearsay. People are going to get their own ideas of what Victor Frankenstein did in that castle. So yeah, now Frederick has to go to Transylvania to finalize the affairs of his family.
If somebody leaves you a castle, you want to go see the castle and pick out the good stuff.
I mean, yeah. Who wouldn't want to live in a castle?
I mean, for at least a few days, you want to be like, yeah, this is my castle in Transylvania. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. So he goes and he says goodbye to his fiancée, Elizabeth. I've always had I could never really get a reading on Elizabeth as a character. Like, by her own verbiage, she seems to be completely virginal. She doesn't even want to kiss Frederick. Nothing romantic at all until they get married. But there's always been a subtext of that's not how she actually feels. Maybe it's me.
Well, there are some old tropes, and they're not always the nicest tropes about the women who say no, but really they just want a man to take them, you know.
We'll get to that when we get to that part of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just say not everything in this movie has aged gracefully. But from this point where he's saying goodbye to Elizabeth and Elizabeth doesn't want to kiss him or anything like that. Like I said, that's always been my reading on her. I don't know about you.
Well, I mean, it's very definite that she's not into him.
But he's also a doctor, which means he's got money, so of course he's going to marry him, maybe. At least that's how I always understood that.
Well, also I think at the start of the movie, her father is probably more wealthy than Frederick. Possibly not after his inheritance. We don't know what the Frankenstein estate carried with it.
But she is still engaged to the man, but has no interest in him romantically, I guess. Sexually,
Yeah.
Definitely. Like,
Yeah.
he blows a kiss to her and she dodges it.
Yeah.
So she's maybe with him because of social status. I don't know.
Yeah, she had to be with him for some other reason. Maybe her father set it up. Maybe, you know, we don't know.
Yeah. It's just something that's always, yeah, just my own thing here. See, let's get to Transylvania. And the oldest gag in comedy is often still the funniest. Walk this way.
One of your favorite Aerosmith songs right here. This is where they got it. They saw this bit, and this is literally where they got the song, they said.
But
this is an old vaudeville joke. Yeah. They just lifted and put it in the movie, but of course by the time this film came out, who knows old vaudeville jokes anymore? So everybody thinks it comes from this film. Yeah.
Yeah, Igor here, his grandfather worked for Victor Frankenstein. And now he is it's never really explained why he is all of a sudden working for Frederick. Is he now caretaker of the castle or something?
Yeah.
Because all we get is that your grandfather worked for my grandfather, and now I work for you.
The interesting thing is that there is a long kind of tradition in some places of that's just the kind of family thing of our family have been caretakers of this land. You know, my father was the caretaker, and we lived on this land, and now I am the caretaker, and my son will be the caretaker, and so it wasn't unusual on big estates for there to be a family who lived in the estate and a family who was the caretaker. And the father would be the caretaker, and their son would grow up to be the caretaker, and their son would. So the fact that Igor's father would have been the caretaker and his grandfather would have been it wouldn't have been that unusual.
Mm.
In kind of European history, it's not. And if you read a lot of old literature, you do find that of I'm the caretaker and my father was the caretaker before me, and it's just kind of how it goes. The interesting thing is that in the Discworld novel series, there is an entire group called Igors, and they are a family, and they're kind of exactly what you think, but they are the best surgeons and scientists on the entire disc. And they tend to practice on themselves, and they are, they wear their scars as badges of honor, and they tend to talk with a lisp, and they say things like, yes, master, and, although mostly that is an affect, and they can speak perfectly plainly if they wish, but that, it's just part of the job. And they rent themselves out to mad scientists and other sorts. And it's considered a mark of high status to have an Igor in your service. And they're just a giant family who are all named Igor. And you kind of find them everywhere where interesting science or medicine is going on. And they're one of my favorite parts of the Discworld, actually. So I love this character, and I love that he immediately greets Frederick with sarcasm. It's like, oh, are you Frederick Frankenstein? It's Fronkensteen. Are you Igor? Oh, it's Igor. It's like,
He does call him Froderick for I think most of the movie afterwards.
Yeah, and I like that at first Frederick's like, it's never mind, And I like that he calls him Igor after that, and Igor just goes with it. Igor's like, yeah, if we're just doing the sarcastic, we're, saying our name's funny.
I mean, Igor is what I want to be as an employee. Just answer with sarcasm.
Like if I have to work for you, I'm going to be sarcastic and mock you the entire time.
And of course, the running gag of the hump,
which is Marty Feldman's creation. They gave him the hump, of course, but the fact that he just apparently kept moving it around during filming. And apparently at one point during filming, Gene Wilder, as Frederick looked around and said, wasn't your hump on the other side? And he went, what hump? And it stayed in the movie. And they just thought it was hilarious, so they left it in.
A running gag that would come back, because Mel Brooks would use the same gag in Robin Hood Men in Tights with Prince John's mole. Not as funny, but still.
Yeah, but yeah, apparently that was just Marty Feldman messing around. And it is one of the funnier gags in the movie. Just the hump never quite being where you expect it to be. The meeting with Igor leads us straight into meeting Inga, which I think is one of the funnier reveals of a character.
Yep, Frederick just throws his suitcase into the hay barrel and just lands on her, and then he takes it off and says, "Would you like to go for a roll in the hay? Roll, roll, roll in the hay."
I've done that so many times. Just, being a kid that grew up in, the middle of nowhere in the country. There's a lot of hay everywhere. So anytime you find a pile of hay, you just jump in it and go, roll, roll, roll in the hay.
How old were you when you figured out what roll in the hay meant?
Oh, I knew from the moment I saw the movie. It was, that was not a joke that was ever lost on me when I saw it, but it's still fun to do.
And the fact that Mel Brooks turned that into a full-blown musical number.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, it's Terry Garr at her hottest at that point. And that's her entire character, is that she's straight up flirting with Victor. Not Victor. Frederick. Yeah, say it again. And, Inga's whole thing throughout the whole movie is she's, showing off the cleavage, flirting with Frederick throughout the whole movie.
But the interesting thing is that this could be like a complete bimbo role, but it never is, which I kind of like. She's actually competent at her job in the lab.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, they could have played her dumb, but she knows what she's doing. It's just that she happens to be blonde and buxom and happen to talk in a lot of innuendos.
Which there's nothing wrong with any of those things.
No.
But I mean, it makes her a fun lab assistant.
Yeah.
But she is also a competent lab assistant, which is great.
I mean, the fact that, and it does undercut. I mean, she does get undercut at one point later on when Elizabeth comes in and she asks, "What exactly do you do around here?" And it's like Frederick wants to push it along, but I kind of would have liked if Inga had actually said what her job was, competently.
Well, the thing is that she did actually start to do that, and then Frederick cut her off, which,
Well, he did just sleep with her, so he's kind of wanted to throw that under the rug.
But, I'm not going to fault Inga, because if I was stuck in a castle with 1970s Gene Wilder, shoot your shot, girl.
Yeah, why not? Of course,
I'm not going to say I wouldn't. I mean, his hair in this movie is on point. All right.
And again, going back to the musical, Roger Bart in that wig looks just like Gene Wilder, and with the impression, it was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good look.
This movie, and I did not really think about it till I was paying attention watching this movie. This movie is responsible for a meme. Where we get the little turning hamster, epic hamster turn.
Yeah, it is one of the great musical things, yeah.
That musical cue here, that's the song that plays when the little hamster turns around and dramatically.
Yeah.
The things when you actually pay attention to some of these movies.
It is indeed.
What? Knockers. Thanks. I'm sorry, because this whole movie is full of one-liners.
Yeah. We also, as soon as we get to the castle, we get to meet Frau Blücher.
Now, there was a long-running thought. Now, it is incorrect that the reason that the horses cry every time she says her name or someone does say her name is that people thought that Blücher meant glue, either in German or Yiddish. This is incorrect. This is the thing a lot of people thought of. I thought about this. I thought it was that for years. Apparently, it's a gag that so many people missed in the movie. It is just someone ominous saying their name, and you get like a dun-dun-dun or a thunder crack or something to make it ominous and scary. Because he wanted the horses to whinny whenever someone said that name as a signal to have this character be ominous and threatening, and people just didn't get the joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a specific thing, though, with the horses. I think that's one of those things of you go too specific with something and the joke falls flat.
Like, if it had just been thunder, I think the joke would have landed better.
Or a musical something, or, I think if it had been a little more generic, but the fact that it's specifically the horses, if it had been like glass cracking or, a scream or, any kind of generic other thing, but the specificity of the horses was what I think threw people off.
Agreed. Except I thought that's what it meant for years until I actually looked it up.
Yeah, and even during the rewatch, I said to someone that it is one of the most debated jokes in film history of why do the horses do that? Because it's, like, I don't know. So yeah, I think maybe it's the specificity of horses specifically. If it had just been any animal that was around.
They could have done the werewolf howl. I think that would have worked better.
Oh, the werewolf howl would have been good. Yeah, I think that would have been, yeah. But yeah, I just think that the horses was kind of where the misstep was.
So we find out a Frau was Victor's lab assistant back in the day. Though she feigns idiocy on what exactly Victor did in the castle.
And where his private library may have been, and
the laboratory and all that, yeah.
But of course later on she's the one through her violin playing that leads them to finding the laboratory,
finding the notes, finding everything,
and finding the book How I Did It by Victor Frankenstein. Also one of the rejected book titles from O.J. Simpson.
I didn't want to mention that, but yeah. I mean, now if you have a book that says How I Did It, I think what people are going to think about.
You know what? I'm just going to say, now that Norm Macdonald's not here to do it, it is up to us to continue to remind people that O.J. Simpson is, in fact, a murderer. Because Norm would have wanted us to.
Hey. He was willing to lose his job on SNL for it.
Indeed.
I love this painting of Gene Wilder in the movie.
Yeah, the two paintings that they did of Gene Wilder as Victor Frankenstein with, him first, the painting as we see it first, that's just the portrait of Victor, and then after Frederick reads it and goes like, it could work, I'm gonna make a creature, and then it's the painting smiling, with the maniacal smile. I love those two portraits.
Again, one old gag in comedy, as several movies have done something like that.
Yeah.
Even, again, Mel Brooks, another joke that Mel Brooks would recycle for Robin Hood Men in Tights, when Tracy Ullman brings out the stand-up of the Sheriff of Nottingham and professes her love for the man, how it goes from a smiling picture to a very scared look.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's old joke, but it still works.
Sometimes the classics are the classics for a reason. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, so, I mean, Frederick gets the nightmare. I was like, he doesn't want to be a Frankenstein. He doesn't want to follow in his family's footsteps, but he's kind of pushed into it by Frau, the movie also is implying that it is the spirit of his grandfather that's pushing him into joining the family business, as it were.
Well, it's destiny.
Destiny.
Yeah. They,
put the candle back.
I gotta say that the put the candle back sequence is one of my favorite sequences in the entire film, because it just builds so perfectly. In the, well, maybe you take the candle out, maybe you put it in and then take it out just a little bit, maybe you twist it a little to the just them trying to figure out the exact combination of the candle and the way that the thing turns. And then he finally figures it out and he's finally free, and then you just hear Inga, put the candle back. I love that whole
That's the
sequence.
great payoff of that entire scene.
Yeah. And then they finally get down there thinking that they're all there, and then they get to the row of heads, and then the final one is Igor, and he sings, I ain't got nobody. And then he's like, I just took the dumbwaiter down. It was,
Yeah, but I mean, every time I hear that song, I think of our friend who was like, that's his go-to karaoke song.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was like, so obviously Igor heard the violin music just as Frederick and Inga did. He just took a different way down.
Yeah. I also love them finding the violin and Igor touching it and saying, it's still warm. Yeah, it's like, it's so good. But we really need to fast forward to the creation of the creature here. So, Frederick decides he's going to give in to destiny. He's going to create the creature. And they need to create a creature who is larger, because that will make things easier somehow. Cue the joke about the enormous Richard.
Yep.
Because you have to work that in somehow, because men are writing this.
It's going to be very popular.
Tell me men are writing this without telling me men are writing this. Fortunately, we're having the hanging of the 7-foot-tall serial killer. That helps.
Yeah.
I love how easy that was. Didn't have to cobble anything together. It was just do you need a 7.5-foot-tall serial killer? Oh, we just happened to be executing one today.
I love the transition between Igor's drawing and the hanging of the serial killer.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, we don't know what he did. We just know that they're hanging someone.
He's a criminal of some kind.
Yeah. Criminal of some fashion.
Yeah. Unlike his grandfather, who had to take several cadavers and make a body out of that.
Yeah, just ready-made body that is apparently the proportions, because it's a comedy movie and we need to speed this up. So all we need is the brain. Send Igor to get the brain. It's apparently a real guy that they're
Hans
talking.
Dubrick, yes.
Yeah, Hans Delbruck. That they're sending. But Igor sees his reflection in the mirror, gets freaked out, drops the brain. It's mush now, so he's got to get Abby someone. Hey, one brain's as good as another, right?
It's brain. It's all it needs. It's a brain.
It's a brain. It's
Brain.
meat. You know the drill. Lightning storm. Give my creature life. Ah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. We go up. We have a little pout. We have some sausages. And then the creature comes to life anyway.
Delayed reaction. Delayed reaction.
Yeah. Yay, creature. But the creature has the Abby someone brain and it attacks. So we've got to play charades.
It's funny to me because again, the obvious is there, but they're so dumb in this scene that they have to get the big clues.
Yeah, it's such a goofy scene that you can't help but love it.
Meanwhile, the villagers are kind of understandably concerned that another Frankenstein has moved into the castle and they don't want any more problems.
Look, there's a Frankenstein in the castle and we just had a giant thunderstorm. Okay, we know where this leads. They get Kenneth Mars to do the Kenneth Mars thing. He's got a prosthetic arm
that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
And sometimes it's on the other arm. There's actually a couple of scenes where it switches arms. I don't know how many people notice that, but sometimes it's one arm, sometimes it's the other.
If the hump can change position, so can the arm.
Yeah. The monster eventually kind of...
Frau Blucher sets the creature free, realizes that she can control the monster with the violin, just like Victor did. And we find out...
this is where we get one of the greatest line deliveries in the whole movie. He was my boyfriend. The choice to use the word boyfriend, I think, is one of the greatest comedic, home runs in this entire film.
A different movie would have probably used lover or someone or something else, but the fact that she used boyfriend just punches that comedic tick.
Yeah, it's that is one of the greatest choices.
Or we were in love, but yeah, the specific use of boyfriend.
Yeah. Monster gets freaked out because, sparks, fire, roar.
Fire bad.
So we get the fun little romp of the creature running around the countryside, and we get
our references to the first two films.
Yeah, the little girl from the first film, who doesn't end up drowned, but ends up getting thrown through the window of her parents' house and safely back into her bed.
He's not such a bad guy. He's trying to make sure she get into bed on time.
And then we get the famous blind hermit scene from the second film, which does not end well for the monster.
He gets hot soup poured on his reanimated junk. He gets his hand set on fire.
Yeah, this is such a great comedy bit between Peter Boyle and Gene Hackman. Oh, just one of the great scenes in film between the two of them.
Words cannot describe this scene. You have to actually watch this scene. Most of this movie, you have to just sit down and watch it. Side note, I watched this movie on Amazon Prime because it's available for streaming. And if you have Amazon Prime, please go ahead and watch it. It's a good movie.
Yeah. Really, really good use of your Amazon Prime should you have that feature. But this is such a good little bit of physical comedy. You can't really talk about it in vocalization.
Yeah.
But I like these two bits because you can tell that they're love letters to the first two films and to what James Whale did with those two films. But they are a fun twist on those two scenes.
Yeah.
But then the monster hears the music, and we find out that Frederick is playing the music and, lures him Pied Piper style back into a room and locks him up and decides to go the exact opposite of his grandfather. Like we said at the beginning, instead of, ignoring the creature that he made, he decides to show him love. He goes in and he tells him, like, you are my creation and I love you. You're gorgeous and wonderful, and they don't understand you, but I do. And I am a Frankenstein.
Yeah, he embraces his lineage finally. And like I said, this is the twist that really makes this a great sequel to the Frankenstein lore. Yes, it's a comedy, but taking it is that Frederick learns from the mistakes of his relatives, where Victor and even his own father, again, if you go by the other Universal movies, abandoned the creature. He embraces the creature. He shows compassion and love to his creature that none of the other creatures got. And I think it's because he was so adamant of not being a Frankenstein that was the trick, to show love and compassion, when all of the others would shy away or even try to end the creature's existence.
Yeah, don't abandon your children.
I wonder if Mary Shelley had any daddy issues when she wrote that book.
No. Not really. I think it was more societal daddy issues rather than personal. But the interesting thing is, this is kind of where the movie goes away from the Universal Frankenstein films and more into King Kong.
Yeah, we get a stage performance. Frederick brings the creature on stage, and he's going to show not only has he reanimated this person with an abnormal brain, but, in the words of Frederick, turned him into a man about town. And we go into the famous Puttin On The Ritz bit. He's got a suit and tie on. He's dancing.
Yeah, it's complex motor function.
Yeah.
So it's not just simple reanimation, but it's actual, complex, sophisticated movement. And some speech,
The Puttin On The Ritz. Yeah.
Yeah. Tuba yuba.
Yeah.
But
it worked. I mean, like, if the one stage light didn't pop, it would have worked. Granted, the crowd immediately turns on them. Like, they want nothing to do with what's going on. But I feel like, they almost turned the crowd around on them until that, like, one light fixture pops and he goes, because, fire bad.
Yeah. I do love Frederick's line of, "For your own safety, please don't humiliate him." There was something deeply resonant about that line.
Like, on one hand, yes, this is a very a 7-foot tall gorilla, as Frederick called him earlier in the film, but he's also a sensitive soul.
Yeah,
You know,
though he seems thick-skinned. But they immediately turn on him. He doesn't actually do anything particularly violent. He does kind of push Frederick away when Frederick
scared.
grabs at him and yells at him a little bit.
Well, one, yeah, he's scared, and one, two, and yes, Frederick starts yelling at him to calm down. And if anyone who knows anything knows, when you yell at someone to calm down, that's exactly what they want to hear.
Yeah. But it's not just that Frederick is yelling at him to calm down, it's that Frederick is yelling at him in a very self-centered way.
Yeah, because we see Frederick's still trying to get the dance routine on, and it's almost like the creature is ruining his dance routine. Again, falling into the tropes of his father and grandfather.
Yeah, Frederick is centering everything on himself again, as where he in the room when he first starts showing affection to the creature, he's saying very nice things about the creature. You know, I'm going to show them that, you know, you are gentle and you are kind, you deserve love. It's very you.
You are not a monster.
Yeah. But when things start to go wrong on the stage and the creature is not behaving exactly the way Frederick wants, Frederick is, how dare you do this to me? I put a lot of work into this. This is my show. You're embarrassing me. It's all about me. Mm-hmm. So the tone flips. It's angry at the monster for what the monster is doing to me, Frederick.
Again, it's like a parent scolding a child for acting like a child.
Yeah, and so he's not worried about, hey, you need to calm down. You need to show them that you are gentle and you are kind, and you, so that they understand you, because you might be in danger and you might, you know, I'm worried about you and what they're doing to you. I'm worried about what you're doing to me. You know, which is sort of, again, the kind of abusive parent relationship that was sort of written about in the books and the first movies and stuff like that, you know. So Frederick still hasn't learned his lesson.
He starts to, but then he kind of relapses.
Yeah, it's back, you know, when the shiz hits the fan, Frederick relapses to what he knows, which is not good. And it's the monster that suffers. You know, yeah, they grab him and they take him out and they put him in chains in the jail.
And it's almost as soon as it's almost like as soon as Frederick regains consciousness after the monster knocks him down, that he realizes that he effed up real bad.
Yeah. And he's kind of realizing that, and we do have a little bit of an interlude where Inga says, I really wish I could do something for you, as she's, you know, kind of rubbing his hand all over her chest. And then we get you know, Frederick kind of stares at the camera for a minute, and we get a cut to black.
Roll, Lindy!
Well, it's more like a let's not roll around too much because we're apparently suspended in midair on the lab table.
Does that technically count as the Mile High Club?
Well, it's not quite a mile, but it's fairly high. It's the fairly high club. But yeah, then Frau Blücher comes in and she's like, by the way, your fiance is gonna be here soon.
Nice. Yes.
Elizabeth is on her way. She's going to be arriving tonight. Meanwhile,
as you're sleeping with your lab assistant.
Yeah, as you finally decided to sleep with your lab assistant. However, over in the jail, one of the local cops has decided to taunt the monster with a match. And the monster's like, yeah, forget this, I'm out of here, and very easily breaks out of his chains. I like the implication that the monster was just being nice and sitting there. Like, I could have broken out of these at any point, but, I figured that it was easier and nicer to just stay here.
Honestly, at that point, the monster would probably be safer in the cell versus being out there.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's a trope that we've seen several times. One of my favorite versions of this is in the X-Men cartoon with Beast, where Beast straight up says, "I'm very strong. I can break out of the prison anytime I want, but I'm going to stay in here and let them know that I'm civilized."
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was the thinking there. The creature was like, well, I'm trying to show them that I'm nice and I'm not a giant rage monster. But yeah, so he breaks out very easily, and I do like the point where Kenneth Mars just walks out and he's like, mobs are horrible, unruly things, and it's about time we had one. We have our little interlude with Elizabeth where she shows up and she's like, oh yes, I'm your fiance, but neither of us are really that into it, but we should probably get married because you're inheriting and my father's probably pushing us into it or whatever.
I mean, Igor, when he meets Elizabeth, is kind of a little... On one hand, it could be he's just mirroring Frederick. He's saying everything that Frederick says, but he gets a little too creepy with it.
Yeah, I don't really know what the purpose of this joke was, but it is a little uncomfortable.
And the payoff of the joke is him doing a Groucho Marx impression. You take the brunette, and I'll take you take the blonde, and I'll take the brunette.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Although Elizabeth is a very deeply strange woman because she's in her room brushing her hair alone, singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Yeah.
In just the strangest way. I don't know what that's about.
Gets the attention of the creature, and he this is that scene that we need to talk about.
Well, this is in parallel to the first movie, which is where, in the book, and not so much in the movie, that comes up in the second movie, but in the book, the creature says, if you're going to abandon me, all I want is love. So make me a mate who will love me. We'll go off and just be together, start our own family, be our own people. We will leave you alone. And Victor says, no, you're awful, you're hideous, I regret ever creating you. And in retaliation, the creature is like, okay, well then I will kill everyone you love. And kind of starts with his fiance, and so this kind of taking of the fiance is a trope throughout the Frankenstein films as retaliation for Victor not creating a mate for the creature.
For some reason, Elizabeth already has the Bride of Frankenstein streaks in her hair. Never explained.
Some women have gray. It's fine. The creature takes takes her, and instead of, murdering her for that reason, he takes her, and instead he's like, she's hot. And he takes off his pants, and she sees that everything on him is giant, and she's like, oh, okay, let's do this.
But she's still kind of like, hey, no, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm engaged. I'm saving myself for marriage.
It's kind of dubious at first, and then she's like super into it and decides to marry him because she's
life I finally found. Yeah.
So, make of the joke what you will, but
I'm not gonna lie. As the the sweet mystery of life joke is funny, I still kind of like this scene did not age very well.
Yeah, the scene that starts it off kind of does not age very well, but but
she eventually gets into it. That doesn't make the scene that doesn't make it better. But
yeah,
she's clearly into the monster and his giant Schwanstucker, as they call it in the movie.
Yeah. So her and the monster fall in love and decide to get married later down the road. But in the middle of their tryst, the monster hears the music and gets lured back to the castle because Frederick has come to the conclusion that he needs to sacrifice something of himself in order to help his creation. And that is that he's figured out a way to transfer some of his intellect to the monster. It will calm the monster down, enable him to speak.
Think rationally.
To speak and think rationally to the crowd. And
basically save his life. Frederick even says it'll save his life.
Yeah. So they get the monster to come back to the castle. They get there just as the mob storms in. They're begging just for 7 more seconds. But the mob starts to smash the equipment. And they don't know if the thought transference has worked. But then the monster screams out, "Unhand that man!" as they're trying to pick Frederick up off the table. And they're like, "Did the monster speak?" "No, he couldn't have." And he's like, No, put him down. And the monster delivers a wonderful speech about he just wanted people to love him, but then he saw people would fear him, so he thought, well, okay then, maybe I'll just become feared. But that didn't work either. But finally his creator gave of himself at great risk to his life to transfer some of his intellect, and now he can speak to them, and he wants to save his creator's life. And it's a nice little speech.
The one bad part about this movie is that they completely skip over this and go straight to the happy ending. One thing that I love that they did in the musical is show that while Frederick gave the monster life, the ending is now the monster is giving Frederick life, using the knowledge that he got from Frederick as a doctor to save his life.
Yeah, we kind of just ended with like Frederick just laying there lifeless on the table, and we don't really know what happened to him. And then we skip ahead to Frederick, breaking in with Inga, and they're married now.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, okay, he did survive,
That is one of the things that, again, the improvement that the musical did over the original film. But Inga wonders if the creature got part of, since it was a two-way transference, and the creature got some of Frederick's intelligence, what did Frederick get from the creature? And we start finding out as Inga starts singing the song that they were playing on the violin, and it starts to affect Frederick. And
as they get into bed, yeah, we get the growl from Frederick, and then as we fade to black, we get Inga start singing the Sweet Mystery of Life as we fade out there.
Meanwhile, likewise, the creature and Elizabeth are also married. She is completely into him. She's got the hair up in the Bride of Frankenstein style. But it seems that the lust is gone from the creature at this point and completely transferred into Frederick. Because he's just reading a newspaper. He's,
the Wall Street Journal. Not even like a good newspaper. It's just the Wall Street Journal. It's just,
because that's what smart people read.
No, that's what boring money people read.
But it's like she's trying to get him into it, and she's trying to get the creature into the mood. And he's just like, yes, dear. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he gives a look to the camera like, this again,
So yeah, it doesn't look like while Elizabeth may think she has her happy ending, maybe her ending isn't so happy after all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is Young Frankenstein. It's still a classic movie, honestly. I mean, asking the question straight up, yes, this movie has the magic.
Yeah,
Still.
Mel Brooks considers this his finest, but not his funniest film in his catalog.
I'll agree. As taking away the comedic stuff, it is a great monster movie. It is a great retelling of Frankenstein and the twists of Frederick learning from his father's and grandfather's mistakes. It's a funny movie. There's great one-liners, there's great jokes, but there are funnier Mel Brooks movies.
Yeah, just as far as gags, yeah, there are funnier Mel Brooks movies. But this is one of the more cohesive plots and one of the better directed films, and yeah. So I totally agree with that assessment. A couple of the jokes unfortunately don't hold up and are a little cringy.
Yeah.
As we've said, but it's not bad enough to completely put you off.
Other than the one scene we complained about, everything has aged about this movie perfectly. Again, especially if you're a fan of the classic Universal monster movies. Yeah, this is a great spoof of them, but also a great tribute to them. And that's rare to do both.
Yeah, it was so good to have just a really good film this week.
Sometimes you need a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
Like we talked about this again, no offense to people who like the last few movies. No offense to Xenon fans, no offense to Witch Mountain fans, but we really needed a palate cleanser this week. If you haven't seen this movie in a while, or do yourself a favor and do it. It's really good. I mean, it's 99% of this movie still holds up, which is more than we could say about other movies of its time.
Yeah, and then skip over and watch at least the first two Universal Frankenstein films.
Yeah.
Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, both really fun films. So
I think that's all we can really say about Young Frankenstein.
Yep.
Kiki, this episode is episode 99.
Wow.
99.
How far we've come.
I know. It was just, a while, over a year plus ago that you and I sat down, recorded our first episode, and we're still doing it. So we wanted to do something very special for next week's episode because it is the 100th episode of Rewatching the Magic. We want to do something really special. Yes, it's Halloween season, it's spooky season, but allow us to put that on pause for 1 week. Next week, the special 100th episode, we are going to be talking about one of the greatest Disney movies of all time, Mary Poppins.
It's time to get supercalifragilisticexpialidocious up in this bee.
Yeah, so very special episode next week. Come by and fly a kite with us next week. Well, there was some kite flying in this movie too.
Yeah, there was. Hopefully no lightning next week, though.
That would have made it a completely different movie.
Yeah.
Oh, so again, that's all we have to say for this episode. So join us next week for Mary Poppins, our 100th episode, and we will talk to you all then. Bye.
Bye. Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.